So, you know how a lot of people talk about how we have to close down the border? We got to close down the border, close it down, shut it down. We have to shut the whole border down. The whole border has to get shut down. The President Trump should shut the whole thing down, block all of these savages from coming into our country. And I remember that this was quite a common thing to hear on the internet last year, a couple of years ago. And a lot of people were getting into this sort of thing, right? A lot of people were like, yeah, shut it down, shut the whole border down. But here's the reality, and this is something that really most people don't ever think about unless you're some sort of sympathizer for immigrants. Um, if you were to shut the border down, a lot of people would vote Democrat. And a lot of states would turn out blue because I would say this, the two biggest issues that give Republicans leverage over Democrats are gun rights and immigration. Those are the two biggest things that Republicans have in their favor, and it gives them these two issues really are the only things that give Republicans an edge. Now, you could say high taxes and things like that, but here's the thing. Lately, I've been reading this book. I'm almost done with it. It's called White Backlash. And the book is a very detailed study on how immigration influences people when they vote and how immigration can be a really big factor influencing people when they're voting for a congressman, a senator, a representative, a president, things like that. And this book it's a study, but it's a study that amalgamates a whole lot of studies. It references numerous studies, a plethora of studies on immigration and voting. And it finds out, the book demonstrates how a lot of people, a lot of white Americans, and the book focuses on white Americans, not because it's racist, oh, it's focusing on white people because it hates white people. No, it's because white people vote more than any other demographic in the country. So when you focus on demographics and the majority demographic of the voting population of the United States, white voters are going to be your focus. It's just part of the study. There's nothing racist or white genocide. There's none of that going on. Trust me. But what this study demonstrates, or what this book demonstrates, is that a lot of white voters don't mind welfare if there is not a whole lot of immigrants living in their area, or if there's no immigrants living in their area. They don't mind that. So welfare really isn't a huge issue when the immigrant population is very low. Specifically, Latino immigrant population is very, very low or non-existent in their region. So really, gun rights and immigration, those are the two things that Republicans have. And if you were to shut down the border, all right, and let's say you blocked all illegals, right? Illegals just were not able to come in. All these illegals from Guatemala, Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, they were all just coming in, but they couldn't get in, right? There's this entire horde of people, right? Imagine, they're all trying to get in through the border. They can't come in, right? They're begging to come in. Por favor, blah, blah, blah. They can't come in. No, we have this giant freaking wall. We have a, and if you can get past the buffer of La Frontera, there's a minefield. If you can get past the minefields, there's a there's a whole river full of crocodiles that we put in. We imported them from Australia. They're all living in this this giant moat. But if you can get past that, then you have to get through the wall, and the wall is impossible to get through. The wall is completely impervious to any sort of migrants, immigrants, regardless of their plight, regardless of their suffering. And so let's say America has just lost its soul. We lose all sympathy for immigrants. We don't give a damn about these people. And these people cannot come in. right? Or either that, or those countries are so safe and so economically stable that people have no incentive to come into the United States illegally. I'd say it's one of those two situations, one of those two scenarios. And we have no immigrants or migrants, no people trying to cross the border. No illegals, no undocumented, and all the undocumented people living here. You know, the people who overstayed their visas, the people who crossed the border. Let's say we just mass deported all of them back to their countries of origin, right? We repatriated them or whatever. We have no illegals in the country. They are zero in the population. Let's say that that happens in this giant hypothetical. The Republicans would lose one of their two playing cards. They would lose one of the two biggest topics that give them an edge over Democrats. The Republicans don't want to stop illegal immigration. This is why we still have illegal immigration. It's one of the reasons why Republicans don't want to stop it. Believe me, they don't want to stop it. Now, you can cite other examples as to why America doesn't want to stop illegal immigration. For example, a lot of the drug smuggling that goes on, a lot of the the billions of dollars that come into the country thanks to drug cartels. But that's not so much a problem with illegals, because most illegals just want to come and work. But there is definitely a problem with drug smuggling, and the United States does allow drug smugglers to cross the border because there's a lot of money coming into the U.S. economy and a lot of money being deposited into American banks through drug sales. So that's also true. But there is another reason why that we have illegal immigration. There's another reason why Republicans allow it to happen. It's because it's a huge leverage card against the Democrat Party. Did you know that at one point in time, the majority of white Americans were Democrats? For a very long time, for many, many decades, white Americans were Democrats. For many decades, most white Americans were Democrats. And it began to slowly and gradually decline in the 1960s. And by the 1990s, the majority of whites were Republicans. By the 1990s. Now, a number of issues took place that led to a huge exodus of white folks leaving the Democrat Party and going into the Republican ranks. One of them was immigration. The Democrat Party began to appeal to racial minorities. And that is why almost half of all Democrats in the United States are racial minorities. We're talking blacks, Hispanics, pretty much those two demographics. Asian Americans, Japanese, Korean Americans, a lot of them vote Republican. Cubans, because when I say Hispanics, I have to exclude Cubans because Cubans vote Republican. In fact, Cubans are the most consistent voting demographic in the United States. The Cubans vote Republican every single election. For the most part, they vote Republican. Whites can go Democrat or Republican. They can switch. Jews, they flip-flop. They'll vote for Obama one election. They'll love Trump the next election. They will flip-flop. They'll vote for, who AIPAC tells them to vote for. I don't know. But, these people, they flip-flop. Cubans, they remain consistently Republican, more so than any other ethnic group in the country. They vote consistently more so than any other ethnic group in America. But when you look at the reason why a lot of white people vote Republican, a lot of it has to do with immigration. And a lot of it has to do with the perception that the Democrat Party appeals more so to immigrants than it does to American citizens. So if you were to cut out all immigration, right, all legal immigration, oh my goodness, you just lost your main card. A lot of these white folks who switched from Democrat to Republican, a lot of them will go back to the Democrat Party. Now, not all of them will, because you still have your last playing card, and that is gun rights. And that would be, if you were to get rid of illegal immigration, all illegal immigration, right, you brought it down to zero, the biggest reason why people would vote Republican would be gun rights. because the Democrats, there's still this perception that they want to take your guns, and the Democrats uh, do favor regulation on gun possession more so than Republicans. So that is a reality. But that would be the biggest reason. Now you could say, no, 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 abortion. Guess what, buddy? Most Americans don't give a damn about abortion. 77%, and they did a study recently, 77% of Americans want to keep Roe v. Wade. The amount of Americans, the percentage of Americans who actually want to ban abortion are a very small minority. We're talking 13%. Now, it may seem that, there are millions and millions of Americans, right? They are millions of Americans who are pro-life, but it may seem that America has become so pro-life. Well, that really isn't the case. There are millions of Americans who are pro-life and who want to see abortion banned, but there's over 350 million people living in the United States. And that number is growing every single year. So you have 1 million people show up at a pro-life rally. Yeah, that's pretty significant. But they're not the majority. That's why Ted Cruz couldn't win. Let me tell you something. As long as America remains the way it is, and it continues to remain the way it is, and it increases in the way that it is, a Ted Cruz, a morality-based candidate will never become president. It's just never going to happen. That's why Ted Cruz could not become president. He will never become president. Ted Cruz could not become president. That's why Romney couldn't become president. There's too much of a reputation coming out of that evangelical Bible Belt strata that really, I'm not supporting this, but this is just the reality, that really repulses a lot of people. Repulses them. A lot of people hate that stuff. Ted Cruz won Utah. Big whoopity-doo. He couldn't win Pennsylvania. Trump won Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is traditionally known as a blue state. Well, guess what? It's a red state. It was a red state, at least in the 2016 election. And millions of people who voted for Obama, we're talking between 6 million to about 9 million people, millions and millions of people who voted for Obama in the 2012 election voted for Donald Trump. How did that happen? What was the biggest reason why so many people didn't vote Democrat and they decided to vote for Trump? How do you explain that millions of people who voted Democrat in 2012, all of a sudden they started switching to Trump? What was the biggest thing? Why didn't they vote for Cruz? Why didn't they like Cruz or Rubio or these other guys? Because Trump, out of all the other candidates, was the one who focused the most on immigration. Build that wall, Mexico's going to pay for it. None of which has actually happened, but that was his voting point. That was his marketing point. And it really worked. It was very effective. Years ago, they did a whole study on Americans' general views on immigration. And a huge portion of those who were polled in this statistic, a huge portion of the people who were questioned in this poll, a lot of these people wanted a border wall. They wanted a huge fence that would block Mexicans from crossing the border. So Trump tapped into a sentiment that is extremely real. Boris Johnson did the same thing in Britain. And I know UK and America, they're not the same countries. But still, it reflects a nationalist phenomena that is global. And I don't say racist, because not all these people who voted for Trump, not everyone who voted for Trump is racist. I know a lot of the left-wing publications like to say, racism, right? It was racism. The reality is that it was nationalism. And why do I say that? Because a lot of the people who voted for Trump voted for Obama. They didn't mind a black president. So it's really nationalism. Because Obama, he's an American citizen. We'll vote for him. Doesn't mean that they like illegals. In fact, Obama, he authorized a lot of the same policies that Trump is implementing today. Why did Obama have to do that? Because Obama knew, and the Democrat Party knows, that you have to appease the illegal immigrant hysteria. You have to appease that hysteria. All the illegal immigration hysteria, all that, that hysterical sentiment, you have to appease that somehow. So even Obama understood that, and that's why those types of policies, like deporting all those people and all that stuff, deporting even under the Obama administration, people who had children, illegals who had children in the U.S., tens of thousands of them were deported back to Mexico, which really flies into the face of this whole misconception of anchor baby. Even if you have a child in the U.S., doesn't mean you can anchor yourself in America. Many of them got deported, and that was under the Obama administration. So if illegal immigration completely stopped, if it was completely blocked, the last card that the Republicans would have would be gun rights. That would be it. But you see, and with that card, a lot of people would still vote Republican. But guess what? A lot of people would vote Democrat. And because the Republicans would lose that card of illegal immigration, you would have just enough of the population that would vote Democrat to shift the election in favor for the Democrat Party. So it's actually essential that Republicans, it's actually essential for Republicans that illegal immigration continues. And that's the bottom line. It really is quite fascinating. Like abortion, gay marriage, they'll say, well, a lot of Americans are against gay marriage. Well, that's true, but that's not a powerful enough card to win an election. Because what things like Milo Yiannopoulos and Dave Rubin and Dennis Prager have proven to all of us is that most Americans don't give a damn about homosexuality. They don't. Dennis Prager, 10 years ago, would have never said the stuff that he's saying now. Okay, Dennis Prager said the Bible says you can have just as much fun with a little girl as you would with a little boy. And he says, people who get sex changes and become transgender and all that, I respect their metamorphosis. I respect their transformation and all that stuff. And he'll go on the David Rubin show and say things like, oh, I'm so interested in your homosexual romance. Prager would have never said those things 10 years ago. He's saying them now. Why? Because most Americans today don't give a damn about gay marriage. They embrace Sodom. That's the bottom line. So the Republicans only have two major playing cards: immigration and gun rights. You stop illegal immigration completely, the Republican Party is going to stand on one leg. And that's the reality. Anyway, hope you guys have learned something from this message. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.